Welcome to my solo flawless guide video for Hunter in Spire of the Watcher, the latest D2 dungeon that Bungie has released. First off, before we start, if you're watching this around the time this video is released, happy holidays. If you're not and you're watching from the future, come back on December 25th, okay? So let's get started with the guide. I don't want to waste you guys' time too much. I'm going to go over what I used while the gameplay footage plays, and I'll try to mention literally everything I use so to answer everyone's questions for this Hunter run. So first up, the first boss, Akelous, I ended up using Golden Gun with Celestial Nighthawk for this. The main idea behind this is just synergistic gameplay between that and my solar build, which is going to focus around Font of Might, Radiance, Elemental Time Dilation, and the Solo Operative buff, and Weaken Clear, of course. What I ended up using is, of course, Cataclysmic for my heavy slot, because Cataclysmic is nuts and by far the best linear in the game to use. And this boss is prime linear territory, especially given that he moves away quickly from you, and it kind of takes away the pizzazz, if you will, of close-range weaponry. So I ended up using Cataclysmic, and then in my kinetic and energy slots, I ended up juggling between Pardon Our Dust and Witherhoard in the top slot, both GLs, and then in the middle slot, I started with Taraba, and then switched to Cartesian. So the reason I start with Taraba here is because it's a primary weapon. You need primary ammo to shoot all these nodes, as well as the Harpies, the Goblins, the Minotaur, etc. Also, Ravenous Beast is an absolute monster for this, and it stacks well with Font of Might and Radiant, blah, blah, blah. It shreds through everything. So you build up your Ravenous Beast quite a bit and very fast in this, and it helps me eliminate the nodes, and then the adds, and then the Minotaurs, etc. until I get to the boss DPS phase. Now, I will mention that you could use Taraba on the boss's eyes as well for DPS phase with Ravenous Beast. It is pretty damn quick to kill the eyes, so that's a good way to do it. However, I ended up using Cartesian because it can do a faster job than Taraba with Ravenous Beast. I know that's pretty silly to say, but it's true. It does take a learning curve, though. I will say you won't get it on your first try. It's kind of a drag and click kind of thing, like you're almost cutting a pizza. But Cartesian is very, very good on the eyes, and I ended up going with it. Because of this, I also ran a class item with Special Finisher that I would swap to make special ammo at the beginning of this boss fight, and then I would swap back off of it to my Solo Operative and Weakened Clear class item instead. So those are my recommendations in terms of weapons for you guys. Obviously, if you don't own some of these weapons, it's up to you what you use, but typically speaking, I would go with a solar build for this boss, so think solar weapons to replace like Cataclysmic with Sleeper or Taraba with like Borrowed Time, things like that. Though, definitely bring at least Witherhoard or some sort of GL for Weaken Clear for sure. Quickly, for my class, I used Gunslinger with Nighthawk. I had Golden Gun Marksman on for massively increased precision damage. For abilities, I had Acrobat's Dodge. This is basically just to give you a second Radiant buff during your damage phase once the first one runs out. Typically, you'll go Radiant, Witherhoard into Cataclysmic, shoot all your Cataclysmic shots, and then what I did after my last Cataclysmic shot is I do the Acrobat's Dodge, go forward, avoid the hole in the wall, pop Nighthawk, shoot Nighthawk, go back to Witherhoard, then swap back to my other weapons, and my Cataclysmic will already be reloaded. Then I proc bait and switch again for the damage phase. By the way, on the subject of eyes, the faster you destroy the eyes, the longer damage phase you will have. If you're very slow at shooting down the eyes, your damage phase will be really, really short. If you do it really quickly, like with Cartesian that I show, then you have a longer damage phase, which allows you to do what basically I did in a two-phase kill of this boss solo on my Hunter. Now for knives, realistically, Knife Trick and Explosive Knife are your two go-tos. Doesn't matter which one you use. One you just throw at the target, the other one you throw at the ground if you'd like. What I did is I went with Explosive Knife, put it on the ground, made a Headless Goblin follow me, and that way when he walks over it, he just dies. While he's doing that, I swap my armor piece from a melee wallmaker, which made the well, to another Font of Might, to combine with my Dilation to give me a longer damage phase for the boss DPS portion. For a grenade, just Healing Grenade. Why wouldn't you want more healing? You know, when you're caught in a pinch, you might need it. That's pretty much it. Aspects, on your mark, and knock them down, nothing crazy. Fragments, we have Imperium, Beams, Wonder, Solace, and Torches. Torches, Solace, and Beams are probably the main ones that you want to have. You can interchange the other ones if you'd like, I believe, but I just have this, for example, just to have the plus 10 resilience, because you should always, always, always have 100 resilience for these fights. As I mentioned, I am running Font of Might for this build, so basically the build was you run triple Font of Might, 1 dilation, and then 1 class item where you would run weak and clear and solo operative, and then you would have any particular armor piece to swap out with that would have a melee Wellmaker mod instead of Font of Might. So you would have melee Wellmaker on for the duration of the fight until you get to the damage phase. As you throw your knife at that last goblin before you start damage, you would then throw the knife, switch to your extra armor piece. For example, me, it was a chest piece. I went from melee Wellmaker to Font of Might, put that on, and then start damage, pick up that well, have your 15-20 seconds duration, whatever it is, run out, and then you have that much extra damage instead of normally where you would have, 1 Font of Might on and have a standard amount, and then, you just run out very quickly and do less damage. So just kind of to explain the rundown for my damage phase here, the idea was you shoot the eyes with Cartesian, break them very quickly, have that count as part of my first weapon for bait and switch as well, pick up the Solar Well on the ground, switch to Wither Horde, shoot him with the Wither Horde to get weak and clear going, and then switch to my Cataclysmic. Shoot all of my Cataclysmic shots, even the ones I get from 4 times the charm. As soon as I hit 0, activate Acrobat's Dodge, which procs Radiance again. Then use my Golden Gun with Nighthawk, shoot him in the face, switch back to Wither Horde, hit him with Wither Horde. This triggers my other ammo to be ready for my other guns. Switch to Cartesian, take a shot, switch to Cataclysmic, and then your bait and switch will proc once again with your 6 bullets already there, ready to go. And this is how I completed my damage phase. Did this twice, and the boss died. That's pretty much it for the boss fight. Obviously, if you're not experienced or you haven't practiced this, then you probably will get maybe a 3-phase, a 4-phase, whatever it may be. But I feel like even a 3-phase would be just fine for this boss. That's still pretty damn good in my opinion. You have to super mid-max for a 2-phase. I would not worry about it. Just stick to being consistent over trying to mid-max every little, micro thing for this. Now let's move on to the final boss. So for the Persys boss fight, I switched it up from Golden Gun, and I actually ended up going for Gathering Storm and Arc on my Hunter in general. The reason for this is because, 1, the use of my heavy, which was Hothead with Fuel Prep and Clown Cartridge. It did great damage. You can combine it with Font of Might. And also, since I'm using Arc, I can abuse an exotic called Assassin's Cowl. If you don't know what this does, essentially, every time I get a finisher or a melee kill, I go invisible. Now you combine this with the class and the ability of Combination Blow, which stacks up your melee damage every time you get a stack up to 3. I can just melee everything out of existence with 1 punch and go invisible every single time, dodge, get my melee back, rinse, repeat. This lets me move around the map seamlessly almost, and just around the boss and anywhere I need to go, whatever setup I need, the nodes, getting ammo later on in between phases, all that. It's very, very helpful. Its survivability is absolutely nuts, to say the least. On top of that, Gathering Storm is a good super in its own right, and it does do a chunk of damage to the boss. Now, I will mention that I use a second exotic in this fight, and those are Star Eater Scales. Obviously, you don't have to do this if you feel comfortable in just using Assassin's Cowl for survivability purposes, and you want to just throw a normal Gathering Storm at the boss. That's cool. I ended up using a build where I would switch to Star Eater Scales in between the middle of the fight, get 4 orbs, pick them up, get Feast of Light, and then start damage phase, thus pumping my Gathering Storm super at the boss and doing more damage like that. So the idea behind this fight, mod-wise, is basically exactly the same as the Harpy boss fight, with one small difference. That is running Well of Ions. If you don't know what Well of Ions is, essentially, you go for a finisher on an enemy, and you make 2 Arc Wells. I opted for this over Melee Wellmaker, simply because if you're doing Melee Wellmaker, you punch the target directly in the face, and chances are the well could just fall right onto you and activate immediately. You don't want this in this fight. When I use my Slapshot finisher on a Minotaur, I Slapshot him, and then the wells kind of fall out a couple of inches or feet away from me and not directly on top, thus letting me switch weapons, or rather armor, immediately as I finish the Minotaur and get ready for my damage phase. Again, I do a hot swap where I go from one armor piece to a different one with Font of Might, pick up that well on the floor, and get my 20-25 second damage buff, whatever it is, thanks to time dilation. Same idea here. Arc weapon. I wouldn't really recommend, like Storm Chaser, for example, because shooting linears on this guy is extremely annoying, and the crit spot is also really wonky, so your damage output is probably going to be very poor with linear. If you'd like to use a different arc weapon, that's totally fine, but if you happen to have a Hothead with Clown Cartridge, it is really, really good, especially with Fuel Prep because of the quick reload when you're crouching. Now, speaking of crouching, no matter what you're using, you should probably be crouching and crouch strafing side to side as you're doing damage, because this boss does not F around. Other than you shooting your Guardian Gathering Storm super at the boss and a couple of rockets to stagger him occasionally, he is going to be shooting you the entire time. So the idea is to crouch strafe side to side or going backwards side to side so that your Guardian doesn't get hit as much as possible, because like a couple of straight shots, if you're not moving, will screw you up and could possibly get you killed. So the idea for this setup is that you would get 11 of 12 nodes completed to start the damage phase. For those that don't know, you get 2 nodes in this fight you need to complete. Each of them have 6 connecting each other. So the idea would be you finish 1, all 6, and the other one you would finish 5 of 6, leave that one alone. At this point, this is where you would be setting up all your stuff that's needed. For example, switching to your starting your scales, getting your orbs for a Feast of Light, things like that. Additionally, if you'd like, you can shoot the Minotaurs in the first room, even if you already have the buff, and get them to low HP to the point where they're finishable. Why does this matter? Well, if you do this, and you go into the next room, in the reactor with the boss, and you're ready for damage phase, you can shoot that final node to get damage phase rolling. Then, you take the exit to wherever side the Minotaur is, that you can directly see them shooting you in the tunnel. Go to that side. When you exit and get into the first room again, you head straight to the middle down the staircase. The Minotaur should follow you down this staircase because they're like enraged at this point and they want to melee you. So they get down to the middle, and this is where you would finisher them, make your arc wells on the floor, switch to your gear piece for an extra font of might, and then shoot the 5 nodes in the middle of the room to get the lock door sequence going for the damage phase. Wait a couple of seconds as the boss is about to start and make that little explosion, and then the door opens for DPS. Pick up your arc well and back up slowly. Then at this point you shoot your whatever you're using for damage. Me personally, I used Hothead. You can use a different arc rocket if you'd like, or a different arc weapon. I wouldn't really recommend, like Storm Chaser, for example, because shooting linears on this guy is extremely annoying, and the crit spot is also really wonky, so your damage output is probably going to be very poor with linear. If you'd like to use a different arc weapon, that's totally fine, but if you happen to have a Hothead with Clown Cartridge, it is really, really good, especially with fuel prep because of the quick reload when you're crouching. Now, speaking of crouching, no matter what you're using, you should probably be crouching and crouch strafing side to side as you're doing damage, because this boss does not F around. Other than you shooting your Guardian Gathering Storm super at the boss and a couple of rockets to stagger him occasionally, he is going to be shooting you the entire time. So the idea is to crouch strafe side to side or going backwards side to side so that your Guardian doesn't get hit as much as possible, because like a couple of straight shots, if you're not moving, will screw you up and could possibly get you killed. Now, for those of you that are keeping score at home and want to know what I have on my Arc Strider subclass, I have Gathering Storm, Gambler's Dodge, Triple Jump, Combination Blow, and Flux Grenade. Flux Grenade basically does a little bit less than a rocket shot would to the boss. However, it's really hard to control. If you're not used to this, you're just going to throw it and it's going to fly to the moon because of how fast it travels. So if you're not used to it, just stick to like a Pulse Grenade. If you are, go ahead and use it for a little bit extra damage on the boss. Aspects, we have Lethal Current and Flow State, nothing crazy. Fragments, we have Resistance, Shock, Feedback, and Ions. I basically just use this for my Arc Hunter build in general, for my 1-2 punch build that just destroys GMs, but I just kept them on for this, and people wanted to know what I used in my previous video for my 3 phase of this boss, so that I would throw that info in here as well. And that's it, let's get back to the boss. Quick note that you should always refresh your buff for Weaken Clear as well. It can also reload a rocket for you in your heavy slot. If you're using Wither Horde, then it's your typical, combination. Throw Wither Horde, throw like 4 or 6 rockets, switch back to Wither Horde, throw another Wither Horde, rinse, repeat. If you are using a different god for some reason, or you don't have Wither Horde, just make sure you have a auto-loading GL in one of your slots. That way you can shoot your GL, get Weaken Clear going, and then later on repeat the same process with auto-loading to shoot him again to keep it on the boss as you're doing damage. After damage is done, don't panic. This is also a part where a lot of people kind of scramble around and don't know what to do. When you're done with damage, the first thing you should be doing is actually going into the back room again where the reactor is from the side doors, and here you can actually just chill and relax and nothing will follow you into this room. Now, given when you get into the room, there could still be old enemies in there, like a goblin or a harpy or two or whatever from the previous phase. Those you can just kill. After that, nothing comes into the room to follow you, as long as you don't, you know, stick your head out and walk through the tunnels so they kind of aggro onto you. If you don't do that, you can stay in the room, switch back your gear, you know, if you need to swap armor pieces, reload your weapons, get your cool back, you know, calm down, no anxiety, and just relax and repeat the process all over again. So from this point, you can just start peeking at the Hydras, throw your Wither Horde at them or whatever you have, start getting them down. Once they're both down, the Minotaurs respawn, and this is where you just kind of repeat the process all over again. Kill Minotaurs, get the buffs going, get the nodes going, etc. Make sure your Assassin's Cowl is back on, start fisting the Vex all over the place, in-game of course, and then just get the train going all over again. Now, one thing to note in this intermission phase is you're probably out of rockets, or you're at least very low on your reserves. The thing here is that you need to reload your stuff, right? You need to have your supply back. You can't just start damage phase with like one rocket. I mean, you can, but it will be a very poor time, and things will not go well for you. So what I do here is I throw on an energy weapon instead of whatever my primary was. So for example, if I used Funnel Web, I would switch to Deafening Whisper. Here, I would use that and then switch to my Assassin's Cowl and just start meleeing until I get my heavy bricks back. And then eventually, I build back up to 10 shots. At this point, I can switch back to Funnel Web or whatever you want to use, and then get back to my primary use of shooting the nodes and all that good stuff. From here on out, it's just a game of stamina. You have to repeat the same process you were just doing, exactly the same, without making a mistake and not getting, you know, glitched, or the boss just like flies at you and flinks into a wall and you die, or something unfortunate like that. So from here on out, it's just good luck, have fun, and don't get bungeed by the architects. On a serious note, I hope this video does help out people going for their solo flawless. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments, and I will try to answer those. Aside from that, if you enjoyed this video, a like, share, subscribe, and maybe a notification bell would be appreciated. It does help the channel. I'm done here, and I'll be back for Warlock and Titan guides as well if you're interested in that. So I'll catch you guys in the next video. Goodbye.